Hello there, this is Toby Houchens, and welcome to Alpha Recon's SRM podcast. We're going to talk about a lot of things related to security, intelligence, technology, and we're here basically to help the security industry continue to improve and to get better. We believe at Alpha Recon and at my consulting firm, Omega Wolf Solutions, that we can do better. We must continually try to do better with respect to the craft, the practitioners of security and risk management. We believe that intelligence is the center of all things and should be the center of all things with respect to sound security approaches and risk management approaches. And we also believe that technology plays a role, especially some of the emerging technology that's out there. You can already start to see it out there in the world and starting to permeate the physical security space. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things on this podcast. Hopefully it'll be educational. We'll have some guest speakers on from different security companies, different thought leaders in risk intelligence, thought leaders in security risk management, and hopefully this will act as a great resource for those that are just new to the industry and are just learning about security and risk management, and even those that have been doing this for a while and are trying to get involved more with some of the latest technologies and capabilities and approaches. This podcast is going to be here for you. So this first podcast will be shorter, and we'll try to post these wherever we can so that most people can consume them in whatever app they want to. But we'll have a regular presence here, and we'll have different subjects every time. But for today, what we're going to talk about is the difference between threat intelligence, risk intelligence, and protective intelligence. So there's been a lot of hubbub out there about the different types of intelligence, and there's different marketing approaches, and different people attribute different meanings to different words, and it's a little bit confusing for people. Even people that have been in security or in intelligence for a while sometimes get confused or are scratching their head when people use certain terminology. And I think it's best to just start with a definition of what is intelligence. Then we can talk about the difference between threats and risks, and then we can talk about the differences between threat intelligence, risk intelligence, and protective intelligence. So shall we? We can start with the definition of intelligence. Now, a lot of people get confused between information and intelligence. So information is just data, information that's out there. It doesn't by itself have a lot of meaning to it, right? Whereas intelligence is processed, refined information and data that has some kind of decision-making support capability, right? So you're taking raw data, there's some analysis done to the quantification, qualitative assessment, some kind of analysis and information rendering has been done to arrive at an output that is decision-making support at its core. If intelligence does not help you to make decisions, it's not really intelligence, it's just information, and information needs to be processed in order for it to become valuable. Just look at how the human brain works, right? Back in my days, my neuroscience days, and today with artificial intelligence and the deep learning networks, the human brain is amazing. It takes in all the sensory data from the five senses. It kind of contextualizes it, relates it somehow to something that we need to pay attention to, and it helps us make decisions, right? We're able to make decisions because of the sensory data that we're interpreting, right? And that's the key word. It's interpretation. It's how you're interpreting. What is that that cognitive appraisal that we're using that's going to take data or raw sensory input and turn that into something that's decision-making support so that we can have the appropriate behavior or action, hopefully most of the time, based on that information that's coming in. So that's the first thing is intelligence needs to help people make decisions on whatever that topic is, and whatever you're collecting information about, you need to be able to analyze that, refine it to the point where it's providing value and as a decision-making support tool. Okay. Next is the difference between a threat and a risk, and this is a really important one because there's a lot of threat spam out there, meaning you just get bombarded with all of these potential threats and things that could cause problems and things that could be disruptive and things that were potentially a problem, but until you relate a threat, which is nothing more than an object or a activity or person that could potentially cause disruption or harm or some kind of impact, if it's just a standalone threat, you don't really have the full picture. You really need to know what is this threat going to impact on, right? So you need to have an asset, a person, a place, a thing, that has some vulnerability, some level of, it has to have a vulnerability, right? If somebody's shooting a bow and arrow at a castle, that vulnerability is quite low. So it's almost not worth mentioning the bow and arrow in that context as a current threat to the castle itself, maybe to the people inside it, but for the castle itself. So there has to be a vulnerability, and there has to be some probability of there being an impact from that threat, and that creates what we call a risk, right? So a risk is some type of vulnerability to some level of impact at a certain level of probability from a given threat or groups of threats, right? And that's what a risk is. And it's, again, when you're talking about intelligence is helping you to understand that, and helping you understand what is the exposure, what is the potential impact, what is that vulnerability, what is the attack surface, right? That's what we would say. Like, what is our attack surface or our vulnerability to these particular threats, right? So now that we've kind of covered those things, we've covered, what is intelligence, the difference between a threat and a risk. Now, what are all these different types of intelligence that are out there, right? You've got threat intelligence, you've got risk intelligence, protective intelligence, geopolitical intelligence, all sorts. There's even more than that, And again, going back to the definition, intelligence is helping you to make decisions, right? So threat intelligence is really the study of threats in themselves, right? So you're looking at threats for the sake of looking at threats, which a lot of people get confused about that. And the cyber world, the cybersecurity world, has really embraced the idea of threat intelligence. If you Google threat intelligence, you're likely to get a list of cyber, security providers, which is fine, but you need to know what you're doing. I mean, you're looking at threats, and typically if you look at just threats without looking at the risk context, you're spending a lot of time and energy on things that may or may not matter, or you may be spending a lot of money on your security program or profile when you don't need to. So you have to understand the vulnerability, the impact, the probability, if you're going to be talking about risk management. And we should all in the security industry be risk managers. That's what we're doing. We're applying our security craft to help, lower the risk or mitigate or manage, or in some cases remove risk. And you need to look at it in that context. If you're not, you're just kind of, bringing up a lot of spam. It's easy to talk about all the threats that are out there, but until there's some kind of an impact and we can assess that and we can interpret that, they're just threats, right? So make sure that you understand the distinction there. And so when you talked about risk intelligence now, what we're really talking about is now we're combining the attributes of a threat with the attributes of an asset, right? A person, a place, or a thing that has some vulnerability, some probability of the threat impacting them, some probability, right? And that's risk intelligence. So threat intelligence is giving you intelligence about threats in themselves. Risk intelligence is giving you information and decision-making support for risks, actual potential impacts, right, from one or more threats. And that's obviously more useful, because now you've got a potential, threat and you've got an impact, or an asset that can be impacted. And now you can actually complete the picture. And now, and so you can see how risk intelligence is much more valuable than just threat intelligence, which is just a bunch of spam of stuff that could or could not be, important. So that's risk intelligence. That's just, obviously that's what Alpha Recon focuses on. Our software, our technology. That's what we're developing. Risk intelligence is actually it's an emerging concept and term. It's recently, just even the last couple of years, we've been really trying to switch some of the nomenclature away from some of these other types of intelligence and making it more of a broad risk intelligence. And what happens is that there's certain subcategories of threats or risks that sometimes get boxed together, and that's what happened with protective intelligence, right? So protective intelligence is also relatively recent, but it's the idea of providing intelligence that's gonna help in a physical security or kind of a protective space. So a lot of the guard forces and executive protection, they call what I would call risk intelligence, they call it protective intelligence. And really all it is a subset of risk intelligence types. That's really all it is. You're just basically classifying some subcategories of risk intelligence. That's what you're doing. So it's fine if it helps people to kind of simplify their approach and their niche and what they're doing specifically, but you really need to look at risk management comprehensively in order for it to be effective, in my opinion. So every time you try to take a little small chunk and look at it in a silo, you're going to probably be missing things, and that's not a good thing. So I like to, we need to broaden our horizons when we're talking about risk management, and that's why I like risk intelligence, because now you're able to look at the whole picture. You're not just looking at small bits and pieces of it, because believe it or not, there's things that you don't think that would impact physical security about a business that do, right? And they wouldn't normally be under protective intelligence, but they do have an impact on your security profile, and they should have an impact on your security program. And your customers would really like it if you'd actually monitor these things in addition to the other kind of more commonly covered intelligence areas, right? So those are just a few different ones, and and obviously you've got your geopolitical intelligence and military intelligence, and there's all sorts of intelligence out there. But I'm trying to focus this down into what we as security and risk thought leaders and practitioners need to be thinking about, right? And how these concepts can impact how we do our jobs, and what tools we use, what technologies we use, what approaches we use, how much planning, how we're leveraging intelligence and integrating it with our programs. These are all super important. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm happy to talk further about it. It's easy to contact me or the company. Obviously we're going to continue doing some of these podcasts. We'll have some guest speakers from different security companies and different thought leaders in the intelligence and technology space, especially with data science and some of the emerging technologies that are out there that can really help some of the problems that we're facing as a society even today, in the news. It's every day. There's another lapse. There's something that seems like it could have been prevented that's not. So we just want to do the best we can to increasingly improve the way that we're doing business, as security and risk professionals, and whatever we can do to help, we're here for that. And hopefully this series of podcasts reflects that, and hopefully it's valuable. But pay attention, to some of the podcasts that are going to be coming out. Really appreciate you listening to this. Hopefully you're able to like it, share it, depending on where you're digesting the content. To help us, keep this going and, keep bringing awareness and some of these emerging capabilities to the security industry. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, it's Toby Houchens, founder and CEO of Alpha Recon. Also own Omega Wolf Consulting. So I'm happy to help out in any way I can moving forward. But please hit the like button, share us so that we can get some of this content out there. Because it's pretty important, and we believe strongly that it's going to impact the industry. Thanks.